This isn't your typical self-help podcast. We're not here to sugarcoat things or offer empty platitudes. We're here to give you the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. And the truth is, guilt is a weapon. But the good news is, we're going to show you how to disarm it. So, we were talking about how guilt is a powerful tool used by those who want to control you. Can you tell us about that?
Well, sure. Actually, this goes back millennia. Religions were the first to learn how to control their following through the use of guilt. Think about it: original sin, heaven, hell. You don't do what the church fathers expect of you. You don't follow them, pay reverence to them, give them the honor and glory of being your leader. You're going to rot in hell, right? That's a use of guilt, and that controls people and assures a following. It assures their power over the people. We were just discussing before the podcast, could the following mode be make you susceptible to this tool of those who want to dominate you, of guilt? And actually, as we're just sitting here talking, I think you stumbled upon a good point, because if you're in the following mode, you're willing to accept what your leaders tell you. And if your leaders tell you must do this, or you're guilty, or let's go up to current day. The original sin now is basically, just being quite honest, is being a white male, right? That's the original sin now.
White guilt.
Right, white guilt, original sin. You're born white, you're guilty. No matter what you've done, no matter what actions you've taken in your life, you're guilty. It's the modern day American woke original sin, and it's guilt used to control you. Also, we go into areas that are not scientifically sound, but are being used as weapons of guilt. Say, Mother Earth, saving the planet, preserving the planet, your carbon footprint, and basically they associate that with guilt and evil. So they can control you. And look at all the legislation and the sinking of America because of the use of guilt on people. And people aren't necessarily philosophical by nature. They're raising a family, they're getting by, they're trying to be successful in their jobs. And they're not necessarily sitting down in the evenings and thinking for 2 or 3 or 4 hours about philosophy and about things such as control and psychology and guilt. And the true victims are those who are just innocently accepting the guilt poured on their shoulders.
Right. Most people want to be good people.
Yes.
And most people want to help others and do right and do the good things in life. And like you said, they're busy going about their life, living their life day to day, making money, taking care of their household and children, going to work, producing or creating values. And so it's kind of a secret trick or a poison that's been thrown upon them with that tool of guilt.
Exactly. And here's the reason it's so powerful as far as controlling the innocent general population. You see, most people are innocent, good people. And when I say most people, I'm referring to largely the working class people who are just contributing values to society for their pay in return to raise a family or to live successfully in society. Their minds, that's the majority of people, their minds are different than the minds of those who have risen up through the unearned route, taking advantage of people, largely politicians, regulatory bureaucrats, a lot of people in the media, a lot of lawyers. Their mind has something very dark inside that the average person's mind does not have. Therefore, the average person has no idea, cannot even conceive of this evil being used against them. And so therefore, as you were just saying, they take it at face value. Well, wow, I want to be a good person. I don't want to destroy the earth, or I don't want to be a bad person because I was born white. I want to be good. I want to fit in. I want to be accepted. I want to be loved. I want to be liked by my fellow man. So their innocent minds are defenseless, is the word, against the minds that have this evil in them, that want to control and want to subjugate and push down people for their own benefit, to rise up on the backs of others. So the average person doesn't know that, has no clue, totally clueless as to what's going on. So those in power, when you look through history, you see those in power use guilt as a weapon to control the people. Look at what, like we said, what's going on today, and even through the whole COVID experience, which a lot of falsehoods were pushed upon the people. You had a little sneeze or a little sniffle, and the whole room would look at you like, oh, you evil person, right? Did you ever feel that? I felt that. I couldn't dare cough when I was in public because you were demonized if, God forbid, you coughed or sniffled.
Even worse than that, they took that to the extreme of, if you don't get an injection, then you are an evil person and you're killing everybody around you.
That's right.
What a major abuse of that manipulative tool of trying to make you feel bad or sound and look like an evil person if you don't do exactly what they say.
And here's the problem. It rubs off on other people. For example, I know a very top surgeon, national surgeon, and we were at a get-together, and he had said to me that if someone comes into the hospital and needs back surgery, if they haven't gotten a vaccine or the booster, to hell with them. I'm gonna let them die. He actually said that. And I was like, you're kidding, right? And we had this argument about this, and he himself doesn't harbor these evil, dark thoughts that those who are doing a power grab up above, the ruling class and the media and big tech, by suppressing honest information. This fellow was innocent, but it rubs off on him because he thinks, I want to be a good person. I want to abide by what my leaders tell me. The World Health Organization or the CDC, if they tell me this came from a wet market, I'm going to believe them. If they tell me that people should not get medical treatment if they don't follow through on their vaccines that the government pushed upon us, well, then I don't respect people who don't do this as well. You see, it rubs off on innocent people because innocent people want to fit in, do what's right, and if they are continually told lies, they start believing it. It's like you say a lie enough, the general population will begin to believe the lie, and then they push those same feelings of guilt and disrespect onto others, and it just sort of spreads like wildfire out there. And that's what happened during COVID. That's what happens to a large degree with the whole save the planet, man is the destructive evil person destroying the beautiful planet. And you see it spreading. You see people who I'll just mention one. When William Shatner did his orbit and he comes back to Earth and he's bawling, and he says that the reason he's bawling is because he looked at this beautiful Earth and know that we're destroying it. You see what I mean? He's probably not someone who's up there trying to do a power grab or anything. He's just innocent guy. I've always liked him as an actor. He's an innocent guy like all of us, but he just keeps hearing this lie poured into his head over and over again, and then he picks up the venom himself. And it is like a mind virus. It just starts spreading throughout the population. And this is how these leaders get these power grabs, through this use of guilt as one of their primary weapons of control.
And so how can they, do you think they're aware of that power and actually how to wield that weapon?
Absolutely. They don't, look, I can tell you from people I've known, they do not have these loving feelings in their hearts that they project. I remember reading in Neotech something called toll booth compassion, meaning it's there's all this compassion, but wow, you pay for it, and that's what they're after. They're out after the payment, whether it's financial payment or whether it's a power grab, psychological dominance. It's simply for power, wealth, control. Remember, when you dig into the psychology behind these worthless leaders who never created a value in their life, who never contributed to society in their life, who rose up by getting elected basically through the gift of the gab and sounding good. By the way, when you vote for politicians, be careful. Don't just always vote for the one who speaks the smoothest, and because those people often, I just call it the gift of the gab. They're just creating these illusions to control you, and they're really good at speaking, and so they can create these illusions and make you actually think they feel it in their hearts, but they don't. They absolutely don't. I've known enough of them to tell you with certainty that this feelingness in the heart is all part of their game of creating these illusions to control the innocent people who don't have the dark matter in their brains that these evil leaders have and use against you to control you and reap the glory and the power of being your leader. They have no true built self-esteem. How do you build self-esteem? You build self-esteem through building values for your fellow man, for creating values for society. These people have never created a value in their life. They have these fake supervisory roles, but if you read enough of Neothink, you realize you don't need that ruling class. You don't need them. They're just getting in the way. They're just slowing everything down with their illusions of benefiting the population. But they're just illusions. You will come to learn this. They're just so they don't have any self-esteem, Wallace. They don't have any self-esteem. So how do they feel? Without self-esteem, how do they feel? They need power. They need control. That's how they feel. They feel by dominating other people. They aren't providing real values to society, so they dominate and control society. That's what I'm exposing in my writings.
And so that a large way that they dominate people and control them is through guilt. So
Yes.
How does that really work? And if enough people are saying something, how is the everyday person able to know whether if something is true, they should believe that or not, when maybe 90% of everything they see is saying the same exact thing?
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? They don't know. And because they don't know the evil, and because they don't have it themselves, that's what took me probably the longest amount of time for me to understand that I, in my mind, don't have what those evil leaders have in their minds. And therefore, how do you psychologically parry with someone who has something in their mind that you don't even understand or know? It's an extremely challenging situation, and the vast majority of the population, they're not able to parry with that. They're not able to defend themselves against that.
And so what do?
Well, what they should do is actually start listening to my videos on YouTube and subscribe to my newsletter at neothink.com and read my books and join the community so other neo-thinkers who have spent hundreds or thousands of dollars over years or decades understanding neothink, and prior to that neotech, the idea system from which neothink grew out of, they will benefit from all of those people who are already in my society. You know, we're just going public for the first time. I've always had a private club, a neothink club, and I've never allowed outsiders in. I've only invited people who I went out and searched for, and I found the searchers of the world and brought them in. But now, because of the state of things today, I am for the first time going public. And in the process of going public, we're going to start a community that's free online where all my readers will be. And therefore, they will be there acting as mentors, completely willing to help newcomers who are struggling with this, who don't have the defense mechanism that my readers now have. My readers are totally armed against this use of guilt. But the majority of people out there are not. Come and join the free community. Can you just say how to get to the free community? Because we're just in the process of setting this up right now.
If you want to join that community or find out more, it'll be in the link on the description or the link in the bio.
Also, I'd like to add that as we're just starting this community, I'm not going to charge. It's going to be free. However, a point will come where we have to start charging for this community because of the long-range goal of actually starting a new country. So we're going to need to raise funds. But initially, I want anyone and everyone to come in and join for free. And if you do get in on the first batch for free, I'm going to grandfather you in. So when I do start charging, you don't have to pay. So with that in mind, proceed now to join this community while it's free. And you will develop a defense mechanism against all that has worked against you all your life and largely have held you back. So we want to liberate, we want to free people of this suppression by guilt.
Mm-hmm. And yeah. So is there a difference between healthy guilt and unhealthy guilt? For example, you know, if maybe I said something mean, I feel guilty and then want to make amends.
No, that's honesty right there. If you do something that's wrong, and you can and oftentimes you should feel guilt, at least some degree of guilt over your mistake, and that's completely different than someone pushing guilt on your shoulders to control you. So yeah, let's just make that distinction. That's a good point.
Okay, and I guess I want to explore that a little further because there is healthy guilt, honesty,
Yes.
and then there's unhealthy guilt or a manipulation of guilt upon you.
Yes.
And I guess, is there a distinction, a clear distinction between the two, whereas perhaps one is a direct result of your actions, whereas the unhealthy and dishonest guilt or the manipulation, the tool used to control you, is that either, it seems like when that's used, there's almost nothing you can do to directly affect the outcome that they want. So like, you know, with Save the World and that whole use of guilt, you know, it's like, what did you do to deserve that guilt? Have you been doing things to, I guess, as opposed to, you know, if you said something wrong, you caused that and then you can correct that, as opposed to something more big picture, obscure, with no real clarity.
Well, I can guarantee you this. I can guarantee you this much. First, let's just distinguish between the two. Guilt that you feel because you've done something wrong. Look, I don't recommend that you go and carry that guilt for your life, but you do need to learn from your mistakes and then move on. And by the way, one nice thing, or one good point of how to handle mistakes that you've made in your past is to think of it this way. In today's today, in today's moment, would I take those actions that I took when I made those mistakes? And if your answer is absolutely not, you have grown as a person beyond the person you used to be. So it will really help you leave behind a lot of the feelings of self-imposed guilt. So just remember that little point. If you feel really guilty about something you've done in your past, ask yourself, would I do that today? And if you still like shrugging your shoulder and say, well, I might, then you still need to struggle with that. But if you are saying, absolutely not, that was wrong, I would never, ever do that, then you've grown and you're not the same person. And then you can start shedding some of your self-imposed guilt. Now, back on the other, I can guarantee you this, that however you try to give in to the guilt that's put on your shoulders by external authorities, by ruling classes, you'll never satisfy them. The more you give them, the more they will take. And it's a vicious cycle, and it continues. So you'll never be free of their control. Remember, they're not doing it to cool the Earth's temperature, for example, or they're not doing it they really don't care about you as a person. Let's say it's the white guilt thing. They just want more and more control and power. That fills their pseudo self-esteem, their sense of importance over you, over the world, and it's addicting to them. It's almost like a drug. So you will never satisfy them. So don't go down that path of trying to satisfy them, because it's self-destructive. You need to be strong. You need to join this community so you can learn from people around you who can see through these illusions that hurt us.
And maybe a big point, and something you write about a lot, is that when you go through life, you should not be having any, or at least underlying, feelings of guilt. And you write about how short your life is, and that justifies how right happiness is, and that if you walk around feeling guilt cast upon you by other people, you're not going to be able to fully enjoy your life.
I'm really glad you brought that up, by the way, and that is such a great point to add to this discussion. People don't realize how short life really is. And when you understand the value of human consciousness, the human consciousness is undeniably the most important value in the known universe, number one. Number two, your own consciousness. You, Wallace, me, Mark, people listening out there, your own consciousness is actually the most important thing in the universe. Now, feelings of guilt to you, that is, to me, to you. Now, feelings of guilt put on you is going to make you think that's not so. The whole philosophy of altruism will make you feel that's not so. But it is so. And by reading my material and other materials that I recommend, or just being around neo-thinkers, you'll come to understand this. Now, when you understand how valuable human consciousness is, suddenly you realize how just horribly short life really is. You know, sea turtles live 2-3 times longer than we do. And we're conscious beings. We should not lose conscious beings in 70 to 80 years. That's a crime on humanity. And what holds back progress for longevity, for curing complex diseases such as cancer and heart disease, and ultimately curing aging itself, is this ruling class suppressing us with these regulations, FDA all these regulations that hold everything back. So we're keeping our lives short. So that's criminal. That is criminal. These regulations backed by initiatory force that suppress the geniuses of society, that's criminal. But no one sees it that way. Now, I see life as should be immortal, conscious life. Now, that's a controversial statement, but in my writings, I back it up. So I see how unbearably short life is, conscious life. So when you understand the shortness of our lives, the shortness of conscious life, when you understand the value and the expanse of conscious life, then you realize the incredibly limiting shortness of life we have to live and experience our consciousness. And that justifies the rightness of happiness. And happiness, as you were saying, is largely diluted and destroyed by these senses of guilt poured on our shoulders since the day we were born.
Right. And you can't fully, as a person, step into your full power if you have these guilty thoughts, these underlying guilty thoughts cast upon you by others.
And why can't you step into your power? Because others are usurping power from you. They don't want you to become powerful because that lessens their power. They want all the power and glory.
And you can't fully move forward when you have these anchors holding you down and pulling you back. Because if you're trying to go out there, make a name for yourself, step into your full power and your full potential, you can't have things holding you back. You need to be looking forward and pushing yourself forward.
And that's what NeoThink does. It liberates you. It liberates you. And I want you to go to neothink.com, subscribe to the free newsletter, and join the community.
So we mentioned how guilt is a predominant tool used by usually those in power or those who want to control you to keep you down and control you. And another thing, so we talked about, or you talked about how regulations by the elite class keep society down through initiatory force. But guilt is a psychological weapon, not necessarily backed by initiatory force, but it hijacks the benevolence in people's minds, just the human nature of wanting to do good, wanting to fit in with society, and to keep, their position and status and reputation as a good human being. So when they hear claims of people saying, you're an evil person if you do this, you're an evil person if you do that, you should feel guilty, it's hijacking that innate benevolence in people's mind as a psychological weapon, where they too want to fit in, to seem like they're doing good, is they grab onto and accept that and then try to almost virtue signal that they're doing good. But then in reality, that's always at the forefront. It's like a facade, you're virtue signaling, but then in reality, when you're at home by yourself, when you're going through your day-to-day motions, it will just eat away at your psyche and eat away at your soul, that guilt. And it builds up over time and renders people essentially useless. It renders people essentially almost incapable, because at that point they've accepted guilt, which is mysticism, which is a false reality. And at a certain point, it becomes so ingrained into their mind where they're not fully able to differentiate between reality and truth versus lies and non-reality.
And that's what is the real trap of altruism, because what they're really doing is establishing a higher cause, and they're living for this higher cause, even when it's self-defeating to themselves. And by the way, most people very innocently hurt their families, hurt their children, hurt their grandchildren, without knowing that they're doing so. The reason why is this insidious control of civilization by the ruling class makes use of illusions. As we said, illusions of the world is being destroyed by man, or illusions that you're somehow a guilty person because you're a certain race. So these are illusions that are being created or cast out there. And so people will, thinking they're doing good by trying to support the illusion without realizing that behind the illusion is an extremely destructive actions taking place to destroy the country, destroy civilization. So they are destroying the future with absolutely no clue that they're doing so. And as you said, they're destroying themselves, because when you live life as a philosophy of altruism and putting these so-called higher causes, particularly higher causes that are illusions, above yourself, it's just going to destroy your soul over time. And we see that, sadly, and that's why we have more people with therapists today, why we have more suicides today, even at younger and younger ages, why we have the anxiety problem, why we have people on Adderall. It's just a cascading problem in our country. And this is, again, part of the reasons why now I've stepped out of my secret club that I have run for over 50 years and have stepped into the public mode for the first time.
Right, and there's all these people and these leaders who do try to manipulate you and take advantage of you. And how you talked about all these problems are going on now. Therapies as big as ever in the history of this country. Yeah. People are having more mental problems than ever in the history of this country. And it's because, largely in part, because of this manipulation and tool, and just they're absorbing all these non-realities, and which just confuses their brain. And people don't know how to fully sort between right and wrong, reality versus non-reality, truth versus fiction.
And it becomes more and more confusing out there as the power class are fighting with each other for your attention, for your power, for the control. And so it becomes more and more confusing. You are attracted to sound good things, but there are illusions that you're attracted to. Underneath the illusion, they're hurting the people. Now, this brings us back to, we talked about therapists and unhappiness. This brings us back to something I want to say to everyone, and that is the shortness of life justifies the rightness of happiness. And a route to happiness is pride. And I want to tell you right now how to feel pride. Of course, pride is always looked down upon as, it's something bad, or maybe you're privileged, or whatever the illusion is to try to suppress and keep you controllable. But pride is a result of living by your true essence as a human being. What is your true essence as a human being? Well, we are the only thing in the known universe that can create values. Dogs can't create values. Kangaroos cannot create values. Trees cannot create values. But you can create values. Now, a lot of you are blocked from creating values because you're stuck in a following mode, and we deal with that. We liberate you from that to fulfill your essence as a human being and to become a creative person creating values for society. That is our essence. And once you live in harmony with your essence, you're happy because you're living in harmony. Any animal that lives in harmony with its essence, that's its peak of happiness. Once you become a value creator, then you will experience happiness. And what comes along with creating values for the world is pride. Pride is a wonderful thing. There's myths out there that make pride something you should not feel, but I am telling you right here, right now, that pride is very important to your self-esteem. When you create values for the world, you should feel pride inside, and that is all part of being happy as a person, and you have the right to be happy. You have the right to be happy. And when you live a life that is far too short, I want you to live every moment with happiness.
So it sounds like pride is the antithesis of guilt, and pride is the antidote of guilt. And I would like to perhaps pose a question. Those who tell you pride is a bad thing, are they also the ones who try to make you feel guilty?
Not necessarily, because remember, Wallace, remember my ex-friend who was a top-notch surgeon? Remember, he's not one of those ruling class elites. He's just a very hardworking, value-creating surgeon. Has saved people's lives, have made people walk again when it seemed to be hopeless. But remember what I told you. The illusions and the sense of guilt rubs off on you because we don't have a defense, because we don't understand that darkness in the elite's minds. We don't know about that, so we have no defense against that. It's almost like a physical disease. Once you build up some antibodies, a defense against the disease, you can stop it. But when, for example, when the early pioneers or the early Europeans came to America, the Native American Indian had no defense against smallpox. It would just wipe them out. Well, smallpox is a very devastating disease, but you understand the point I'm making, that once you have some defense, once you've experienced the disease, once it's passed through civilization, you build up a sense of immunity to it. But if you, going back to the mind disease of, we'll call it mysticism, if you don't have that in your own head, how are you going to defend against that? You're not. And that's the general population. And then that disease can kind of get in their head and they can start acting like my doctor friend started acting, because the sense of guilt, or during COVID, people were just innocent people. No one would in the past look at you if you sneezed or coughed. But my goodness, if you were in a public area for a moment and you happen to sneeze, everyone looks at you and they want to exile you immediately, right? It rubs off on people because they don't understand where it's coming from.
Right. And I want to get back to neothink and how that is the solution. So you write about, and neothink is known as the cure for confusion. It's the ultimate clarity.
Yes.
Neothink, we talked about confusion out there, just mysticism out there, illusions out there, and neothink allows you to cut through that, as we live in a matrix of illusions, as you write about.
Yes.
And so neothink is that ultimate clarity, that ultimate razor that lets you cut through the illusions,
Yes.
cut through the confusion out there to see reality and what is.
Yes.
So how does the neothink mentality and this philosophy show you and encourage you how to shed guilt and embrace pride?
Right. Well, the way you shed guilt is to begin to understand everything we've been talking about today. Building up a defense, building up an immunity to the guilt being poured upon you. You do need to get the information in order to deal with the guilt. But once you are around other neo-thinkers, they talk to you, it's a crowdsourcing experience, it's a wonderful experience. That's going to happen. Now, for most of my life, I've been able to see through this, and I had the great benefit of having a father who developed the whole Neotech idea system. So at a young age, I saw this, but most people don't know this, and it is a moment of enlightenment for them when they are able to see the guilt that's held them back all their lives. And it's a transformation that is just one of such exuberance and joy once they go through this. And I've received tens of thousands of testimonials just expressing having gone through this transformation, this joy and exuberance. In fact, one of our websites has 100,000 testimonials on it, just showing what an experience this is to liberate yourself from what's been holding you back all your life.
And so I would say, if somebody is making you feel guilty, if whatever you hear on the news, on the media, other people, if they try to instill guilt into you, immediately reject it. Do not let that enter into your mind and let that into your subconscious to hold you down from then on.
And by the way, you may not be able to right on the spot rebuke it, but keep that in the forefront of your mind, so when you're not involved in that interview or what have you, you can go home and you can on your own just think that through and say, I do not accept that. I am not going to let that go into my right brain. You have the left and the right brain. The right brain is more subconscious brain. I'm not going to let it go in there and subconsciously work on me for the rest of my life and pull me down. I'm going to stop it, and I'm going to send it on its way. You don't necessarily, in a one-on-one dynamic, if you're on a podcast or TV, you may or may not be able to put it into it right then. You may not, but you will never, just tell yourself you will never allow that to soak into your brain from here on out.
I guess I would add to that and say, in a situation like this, maybe analyze it just on facts, whether if there's something or an action you either should or should not take, maybe a specific set of actions, and then either do those actions or don't do those actions, whether if what you were receiving was correct or incorrect. But don't let that enter into your brain as a ongoing feeling of guilt. Either you take corrective actions or you dismiss it.
And I want to say something here. You brought up about facts and using facts. Be very careful about facts, because that is the weapon that a lot of these guilt pushers use. Facts. They use facts, but they use facts that are out of context. And therefore, they suck you in because you go, well, wow, that's true what they're saying. That is a fact. And they beat you down with facts. They just break apart the context. In fact, most of these fact checkers that I see in the news and online, I just shake my head at them, because they're using their facts to get across their agenda is what they're doing. And it's someone who understands how this all works is just totally disgusting to me. Fact checkers are fake. I'm just going to tell you that right now, because whatever side of the aisle they're on, and most of them are on one side of the aisle, they get across their agenda trying to look all legit by using facts, but they use them out of context, and you can be slightly out of context, and that can change the whole meaning behind something. I see that all the time. At some point, I should start a NeoThink fact checker. NeoThink puts everything in full context, fully integrated honesty. And at some point, we just start up. If there's anyone out there who's interested in working with us on that, let me know. Because what we'll do is we'll talk to you about the possibility of starting up the NeoThink fact checker. And it could take over the market, because people are drawn to reality and to value. And that will be such a value to fact check the fact checkers with NeoThink.
Right. And learning statistics, going through several classes during my college experience, we were taught kind of how to manipulate facts and statistics and data to support your cause. And our teacher was actually a very honest woman, and she would show us reports and reports, news reports, and then she would go through them and show you how they were able to take certain statistics and facts and data points out of context just to prove an agenda or prove a point. Yeah. And so there is fact, and then there's honesty. And that's something that I haven't seen identified elsewhere where that's a core component to a core principle and core pillar to Neothink, which is fully integrated honesty. So could you talk about that a little?
Absolutely, and that goes back to your grandfather, my father, and his Neotech idea system. And the one of the major points in Neotech is that truth is not the standard bearer. It's honesty. And this really became evident in his court battles. And it's the law of the land now is someone can, in court, take the honesty oath instead of the truth oath. Instead of I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God, you can say I swear to speak with honesty, fully integrated honesty, and that you can actually take that oath now. He won that in the court system. So truth, he demonstrated, can be manipulated through context, through putting certain truthful points, and that sucks people in because well, he's telling the truth. And you think, well, that's the standard. He's telling the truth. So that sucks you in, and you believe that politician or that journalist or that lawyer. But when you speak with fully integrated honesty, you cannot just speak truths and leave out other truths. You have to pull everything together honestly. And it's a day and night difference between truth and honesty.
Right. And as an example of that, I would just like to think back to maybe when you were younger, like a kid, and you ask them questions and you know they may have done something they weren't supposed to do, and you ask them about it, and they will just give you one piece of truth. And they're not lying, but it's not full, it's not in context, and it's not an integration of truth, an integration of honesty. And so that's not being honest. You can tell the truth while being dishonest, which is enlightening to fully understand, especially when you hear people and you think they're telling the truth, because they are telling the truth, but they can still be dishonest.
Absolutely. And look at what we've learned today. We've learned that the weapon to control people, a powerful weapon, is guilt. And we learned the process to exert guilt and to control people is through putting together facts and truths out of context to create illusions that suck us in. So we've learned some very important things today. We've learned about guilt, about illusions, about contextual truth versus truth, which contextual truth means fully integrated honesty, which is Neotech, fully integrated honesty.
And what would you say to somebody right now who is not able to live their full life and have their full expression of happiness because perhaps they have been feeling guilty all their lives and haven't been able to step into their full power as a human being? What would you say to a person?
Well, first I would say I completely understand this situation inside and out, and I feel for you. I feel for the human race. Look, we have never had a civilization without a ruling class suppressing us. And that is because of this following mode that we are all conditioned to live with. I want to take you out of the following mode into the creative mode, into the creating mode. And it's a simple process to do so. There are steps and techniques to do so. I've written books about this. I want you to join the community because you're going to get help immediately on breaking out of the following mode, which means liberating yourself from everything that's always held you back and kept you from experiencing that happiness that you deserve. Remember, the shortness of life justifies the rightness of happiness.
live a life of happiness and pride, not sadness and guilt.
I'll shake on that, Wallace. All right. This is a wonderful talk today. I think we've covered a lot of ground. We'll be here a lot more to discuss these things with you.
And we kind of just touched the surface, brushed the surface on guilt, pride, happiness, fully integrated honesty, illusions. So let us know in the comments what topics you would like us to cover more in depth, and we'd be happy to do that.
You know, that's a great point. I would love, because we just talk about these things, I would love for our listeners to let us know what they want to hear about, because we've broken down to the fundamental under everything. That's my superpower, and that's the superpower of Neothink and Neotech, is getting underneath what everyone sees, getting underneath to the fundamental of what causes it to be the way it is, and how it should be, how it is, and how it should be. So anything you want us to talk about, please put your comments down there below, and we'll look at them, and we'll start picking off some of your subjects that you would love us to talk about. We'd love to do that for you.
Yeah. Ask any questions. We'll be happy to answer them.
100%.
All right, cool.
Good.
Thanks, Dad.
All right. Thank you, Wallace. Another great podcast. Absolutely. Okay.